All right, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Form Check Friday. Look at this. We got this guy here. It's Coach Taylor. He's one of the Calgary Barbell coaches. For those of you who might not know, you should, because he's dope as hell. And he's here in Calgary joining us today for the Form Check Friday. So enjoy it. He's going to give his 2 cents on some of these lifts today. For those of you who may be tuning in for the first time, have never seen this before, we take your submitted videos, we put them up on this screen behind us, and we offer our coaching, critiques, and advice to try to help y'all bust plateaus, become stronger, and have better technique. So without any further ado, every episode we leave off with a lifter, and we let our commenters critique them, and we start the episode with them the next week. So that means we're kicking it off with Isaiah here. So let's get started. All right. So just a little bit of context here. Isaiah's doing bench press, obviously. And this is 8 reps with 225. He's hoping to improve overall and had specific questions about his elbow flare, wondering if his elbow flare is too much, too little. Is elbow flare good or bad? What do you think, Taylor? What are you seeing here?
Well, Isaiah, right off the bat, in terms of improving overall, if you're looking to compete in powerlifting, right off the bat, I would just say start pausing your benches, start practicing pausing your bench press now, quite simply because you're going to have to pause in a meet. So if that is a goal for you in the future, just start pausing your bench presses now. And then the other thing, if you're looking to compete, this isn't in every federation, but USAPL, Powerlifting America, depending on where you're from, IPF, you're going to have to keep your head down. Later on in this set, I think your head starts to come up. I definitely saw it come up somewhere. So just keep that in mind. And then with the elbow flare, and again, this isn't a hard and fast rule, but if I was just like to take a total beginner and try to find, say, like a starting point for grip width, when you either film directly from the front or from the back, you want, like when the bar's touching your chest, and again, it's kind of just like a heuristic to start from. It looks like from your wrist to your elbow is pointed in, and ideally we want force going straight up through the bar. I know if like people with wider grips, it's going to look like it's going out, but right now your elbow to your wrist is pointed in. So I would probably just widen your grip slightly, again, just to improve overall. And so we're getting force directly up through the bar. Other than that, can't really see. It looks like you have pretty decent upper back extension. Looks like as the set goes on, we kind of lose the shoulders shrugging up a bit. So do your best to keep your shoulders retracted and depressed. I'm sure you guys have heard Coach Bryce talk about that many other times on the channel. Never. I've never seen a problem with people losing retraction and depression in the bench press. So it looks like you start to shrug as the set goes on. And really the best way to practice that is, it looks like this set is pretty close to failure. So if we can stay shy of that failure, or stay shy of that technical failure, that's going to go a long way for you in keeping those shoulders retracted and depressed, and just continue to work on strengthening your upper back. I think that those are the main things that I would cover.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree completely. And I think a lot of what we're seeing here in how much the elbows are flaring is exactly a result of that loss of position in the shoulders that you're talking about, right? As the shoulders come up, the elbows are going out more and more. So I think, the elbow flare versus tuck thing, I do think there should be some amount of flare on the way up, but I don't think it should be at the expense of the shoulder position. So I think if we get that shoulder position better locked in and keep that on the way up with the press, we're going to see a little less flaring of the elbows. And yeah, like Taylor said, I think this is a really good illustration in this frame here of that kind of inward angle that he was talking about. So yeah, hopefully that helps you, Isaiah. Our next lifter here is Gabe, and Gabe is currently 1 week out from a PA, Powerlifting America meet. So we know the standards that Gabe is going to be judged to here. That's always good to know. 455 pounds for a double. He says this is 90% of his 1RM, and noticed some movement in the knees. So again, we're looking at that little bit of knee cave, that little bit of knee valgus. And he said he's finding himself with the heavier weights really having to drive his knees out. And you can see him there kind of have to pause a little bit. It really slows down when his knees are at their most inwards, and needing to push his knees back out to get going. Now, he's wondering if this is particularly like a glute and hip weakness, and mentioned that he did suffer from some low back discomfort the next day. So we'll get this looping. But I think the biggest thing that I'm seeing here is that we're losing a fair bit of bracing into the bottom, right? Up to this point or so, everything looks pretty darn good. Then we get to the bottom, we see this little bit of loss of positioning here in this low back. And then as we come up, first rep, not bad, but we definitely do see a little bit of that knee cave. And I think a lot of the times this knee cave comes from exactly that, comes from a loss of bracing and a loss of tightness in the bottom as we're changing directions. So I think, yeah, this rep, especially number 2, we can see it more. We lose a lot more back position. So there's a couple different ways I would approach this. Number 1, are we a little too extended on the way down? Are we trying to maintain an upper back and low back, mid back, a back position that is perhaps a little bit more extended than how we need to naturally squat if we're going to squat to depth? Or do we need to potentially widen the stance or narrow it, honestly? I think a lot of the times when the knees come in like that, they're coming into a stronger position. So we might actually want to narrow it. But in your case, as a bigger competitor, I think a lot of the times you kind of need to make room for yourself to get to depth without your torso running into your quads. And, you know, we talk about that a lot on the deadlift and losing position and not being able to get into as much of a good position because the quads run into the torso. So it might actually be that you need to go a little wider. So yeah, I would say most of your issues here are coming from bracing, coming from a bit of a loss of tightness into the bottom. The low back discomfort could be related. It could be totally unrelated. You know, if this was the heaviest session you did in a long time, it might just be a pretty normal, natural reaction. Your body being like, oh, hey, you know, we worked hard. So, you know, take that with a grain of salt. Anything else you're seeing there, Taylor? Any advice you'd recommend for this lifter?
With the squat and the deadlift, one of the things I always like to talk about is everything starts with the feet. And so some of your, like what you're seeing as knee cave or like lower back loss of position might be starting from the feet. You can see at the bottom, like your knees cave, but your feet also are tilting in, whether that's a product of your stance or shoe choice or just like literal strength of your feet muscles and like ankle stability, things like that. Mm-hmm. So even like something like just body weight calf raises or like getting your feet muscles warm and used to grabbing the floor. Mm-hmm. The way that I usually try to describe it to my clients is you want to grab the floor with your foot, big toe, little toe, heel. And because you are getting that knee cave action, in terms of foot pressure, I would just try to get you to cue yourself lateral heel, the outside of your heel, feel the outside of the heel throughout the movement. And usually that should help. Like if you're staying on your lateral heel or the outside of your foot or pinky toe, your knees should stay out exactly where you want them to go. And if we can get that all working together, it should help clear up some of those issues. And to Bryce's point, maybe wider or maybe just even like toes out a little bit. Mm-hmm. It's going to, because your knees are going to want to track over your feet. So if we get your toes pointed out a little bit more, because what Bryce is saying, where like your knees are going to where you're stronger, so maybe just a little bit toes out more should allow your hips to externally rotate a little bit more, give you a little bit more space for your hips and femurs to work around each other at the bottom, and hopefully that should clear up some of those issues that you're having.
Yeah. Now that you point out the feet, I'm definitely seeing that pretty classic kind of like caving onto the insides of the feet. Yeah. You know, ending up very much inside and front of the foot. This is a terrible still. This is like the blurriest frame we can look at here. But yeah, definitely ending up inwards and forwards on the feet. So yeah, I think, you know, the foot tension and being sort of aware of where your weight is positioned on your foot throughout. Like you can see the foot kind of like screw in and forward on the toes as you descend. So there's probably a lot of value in thinking about just rooting your feet a little bit better there. And, you know, Taylor mentioned, we watched this through before we started filming here, but Taylor mentioned the shoe choice as well, being something that might be, you know, something to potentially upgrade that's going to give you a little bit of a boost there just from having maybe less sole or a less compressible sole. Yeah, cool. All right, our next lifter here is Josh, and he's doing some deadlifts. So let's take a look. Josh is 20 years old, lifting for 2 years, powerlifting for one of those 2 years. He says deadlift is definitely a strong point across his 3 power lifts, but he wants to make sure his technique is good, you know, kind of check things on his route here. And he also mentioned that he would definitely like to compete in the future. So what do you think, Taylor? What are you seeing here?
So you mentioned this is a strong point. So at the end of the day, we don't want to make too many major changes to your deadlift. I think you deadlift pretty well. if I was going to talk to a client about your deadlift, or talk to you as a client about your deadlift, the biggest thing that I am seeing that's, I don't know if I would say a red flag for me, but it looks like you're trying very, very hard to get your hips close to the bar. And a number of you probably know Bryce has a great video on this is a miscue in the deadlift, trying to get our hips close to the bar, because what ends up happening is we try to tuck our pelvis forward, and we're starting in a position where our low back is round, right? I try not to freak out when I see like low back roundness. I'm not concerned about your upper back being a little bit round, but you're tucking your hips really, really close to the bar, and I think that's creating more of a power leak. And on the way up, you see, especially as the set goes on, like more loss through like the mid trunk position. And for me, if we can get rid of that, so if you, and how I would cue someone to get to that position is in your starting position, think about getting your weight more back, push your hips back more. And let's see if we can get, yeah, it kind of starts from down the whole time. But pushing your hips back more, it looks like you're trying really hard to get your hips close to the bar, and your knees are way out in front of the bar. Maybe not way out, but I would say get your hips back a little bit more, try to get weight behind the bar more, and see if we can keep your knees back. Maybe not sitting back too far, but that would be my main thing, is just really just trying to flatten out the low back by pushing your hips backwards a little bit more, try to get weight behind the bar. And the way that I would try to usually explain it this way is, if this is, okay, I'm going to be here. This is a teeter-totter, right? And we're trying to lift this portion. If we can get weight further back on your lever or your teeter-totter or your seesaw, you're going to be stronger. So think about getting your butt back a little bit more, get your knees behind the bar, and try to lever the bar off of the floor with your own body weight. And so if you can get yourself in a flatter position as you sit back and down and try to get yourself back this way, away from the bar, push the floor away the whole time. And if you're pushing the floor away the whole time, when you're warming up with lighter weights, you shouldn't sit too low and the bar will just start floating off the ground. So keep pushing the floor away the whole time, and that should help with not sitting too low.
It'll kind of float just like this almost, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much exactly what I would have said too. You know, I think where you can even see this lifter almost lifts up off his heels as he's starting, right?
Yeah.
Like you can see the heels almost floating through a lot of the lift, which means we're out in front of our center of gravity a little bit, right? So definitely what Taylor's saying about just kind of pivoting back on your, like even at your ankle, I think that's going to correct a lot of those things. And maybe help us see a little bit more of a flat back position. Again, like Taylor said, you know, a lot of the times with a lifter who seems to be doing really well in a lift, we maybe don't want to change any of these things until it becomes a problem or we start to see, you know, a lack of progress. At the same time, then we run into like a lot of sunken costs, but it's tough to make these decisions. You know, these are things that we as coaches deal with constantly to try to figure out, like, is it worth changing this position? Is it worth, you know, modifying this lifter's technique when they're already pretty efficient with this technique that maybe doesn't quite look like the ideal model, but is allowing them to progress. They're not getting hurt, you know, all that kind of stuff. So it really is a game of pros and cons and a game of, you know, educated experimentation, you know. So yeah, I think that probably sums up. Oh, there's one other thing I was going to say. I think a lot of the times with this like really pushed forward hips cue, a lot of lifters are also really pushing their knees out really, really hard, and probably more than they need to. And again, that tends to kind of feed into this same idea of like hips super close, knees super far out. We lose a lot of position in there. And I think even if this position was the same, if we just had a little more neutrality or even a tiny bit of extension there, we might find a lot stronger position, a lot more consistent position where we're not going to be, you know, drawn out forward in front of the bar. So cool. Up next, we have Batu, and hopefully I'm saying that right. I'm just going to crop this until it looks, there we go. So Batu is 24, 98 kilos, competing at Turkish Nationals in the 105 category, which is good. Gain that weight, fill it up. It will help your squat. This is his top set. And now he mentioned that specifically that he would call his squat a sort of conventional weightlifting ass to grass squat. He said he tried low bar but ran into a really big sticking point, which is interesting. And that squat is his weakest lift. It's the one he struggles with the most. So as we do every week, we're going to leave this one for all of y'all beautiful people out there to leave your 2 cents on. Go down to the comments section below. Let us know what you think this lifter can do to improve. Maybe you've made this transition and you had a sticking point. You know, what did you do to get past that? Let us know so that we can help this lifter out. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe and hit the notification bell and all that kind of stuff. I know it's maybe, you know, you hear a lot of people ask, oh yeah, you know, do all this stuff, but it really does help the channel. And if you like this stuff, you know, help us out. And yeah, we got some more apparel coming really soon. We'll be doing another launch in November for anybody who's survived this long in the video. We appreciate you. Check that stuff out. We're gonna be maybe doing something like this. It might look a little something like that logo, perhaps. Some people I think like that logo. And yeah, big thank you to Taylor for hanging out and being part of the Form Check Friday this week. If you want more Taylor in these videos, go into the comments section and just write Taylor for president. Taylor for prime minister.
Prime Minister.
Taylor for prime minister. All right, we're gonna call it there. We'll see everybody next time. Peace.